I don't know if anybody's read The Culture Code from Daniel Coyle. It's a really fascinating book that he wrote the talent code, he wrote the culture code, and in the culture code he speaks about 3 elements. Come on, Robert. Thank you. He said the secret to building a great team, there's 3 elements to it, and I hope I can remember all 3. One is to, engage safety, get people feeling safe and with a sense of belonging. That goes without saying because, and he speaks about this at length in the book, when we observe teams, we can actually see, and there's a particular device called a sociometer that will actually monitor the amount of eye contact, the amount of, cajoling that's going on within a group, what people are saying, whether there's actually a sense of belonging. And he said most teams, it's actually just status management. It's not really a team. It's status management, wondering, am I accepted here? Am I part of this group? Do people like me? Have I got a future here? That sort of thing. And it's very much about understanding the energy of the group, that there's individuals in it, but together we've got a future. And so it struck me as safety is such an important part of what we're talking about all of today. Engaging safety, finding purpose, establishing purpose. We talked about that, and Robbie talked about it, and Darren talked about it. So how we actually go forward together, and that we're belonging to this team. And the other one is to share vulnerability. And again, Patrick spoke about that, and those 3 elements, if you think about it, it's about describing our humanness. That I am actually okay, and I belong here, and there's a fit. And so what I connected with the collaborative way was, it was very human, it was coming from a very genuine place of really belonging to a team. And the definition of culture, which comes from the Latin cultus, I'm not making this up, the Latin cultus. Do you know what cultus means? And it's not cult. It means to care. So actually the word culture means care. And oftentimes the culture can be very toxic, and we're often brought in when the wheels fall off and there's problems. And we can often see that begins, with, you have to sort of really invest in building the culture again to one that is more collaborative, but it's certainly worthwhile. Now, who was in the first session that I did this afternoon? Can I just see if there was some here? Okay, all right. I'm going to do a couple of other exercises in this one as well, but I might do this stingy listening one. Are you willing to do that one again with me? But this time you play the other person's role, okay? If you were speaking the last time, I want you to be the listener this time. Is that okay? Just so you get a different perspective on it as well. And for those that weren't in the first session, we started off with this, and this was more to get a sense of where you are as a team within your own organization. So who wasn't in the first session? Okay. So when you read this statement, Faith, Tracy, and whoever else that wasn't, think about how your organization is, because it's really around understanding that you got to know where you're at, and you can start, but you got to start where you're at, not we're going to have a collaborative culture and it's going to all happen tomorrow. Let's look at where you're at, and listening generously. This is the first question that we often ask. Just as an aside, on our website, collaborativeway.com, there is a free self-survey that I really recommend printing off. Even use it with your clients. It's a questionnaire that, about 25 questions, 5 on each of the practices. Fantastic tool to use to give people a sense of how they're showing up. And it's a great resource as well to use, even to give to your partner at home. And they can give you some feedback, or some of your close colleagues can give you some feedback. So on the resource section of the collaborativeway.com, it's a free PDF download, so use it, please. The second one, speaking honestly, speaking straight. Do we encourage people to speak up? This also includes the ability to make clear and direct requests. Often people say, well, I told you. I told them and they didn't do it. And what does that lead to then? It's blame, complaining. Then we build some negative filters around that person, they don't deliver, and then there's gossip, and we end up, feeling powerless. And we have all had that experience where somebody has said, but I told them, and it didn't happen. And so speaking straight is about understanding that speaking up is really a hard thing, particularly for somebody in the organization to speak. The social brain requires us to sort of really respect what our elders or our higher up people think of us. And so we often won't speak up because we're afraid of ridicule, afraid of social isolation, we're afraid of being retaliation, or whatever judgment's going on for ourselves. The third one is being for each other. Again, there's a couple of elements to this. Assuming positive intent, being willing to give immediate feedback when there are performance issues. Who's familiar with that, or who has that role in their particular company where they are right now? And Faith, is that something that you like doing? It's hard, and it's uncomfortable, isn't it? It's uncomfortable for you, and it's uncomfortable for them, so... Yes, which, of course, you like being liked. But, the whole practice of the collaborative way is really not, it's uncomfortable, that's why we don't do it. And in this session, I'm going to talk more than I did in the first one about responsibility. Because really, when you take responsibility, it's going to ask a lot from you. It's going to ask you to step up, it's going to open your learning, it's going to move things forward in your life as you take greater responsibility. Okay, the fourth thing then, the commitment, you're responsible for the success of the commitment. Again, we've talked about this earlier in the keynote. The collaborative way is it's a relationship phenomenon that you don't step over broken commitments. You honor your commitments, being that you honor the person you're committed to, not necessarily the commitment. And you don't make unrealistic ones. Something I didn't mention earlier is you got to be able to say no. Who feels that they're safe to say no where they work at the moment? There's a mixture of, James, you don't think you can say no? But you're a rock star. Yes. 100 new clients this year. The Chamber. Sign up with James before the end of today. So, but if you're not allowing, a lot of people need support to be able to say no. And if they're not able to say no, then their yes is very weak. And are you better off knowing now that actually it's a no? I can't do that realistically because I got these priorities. Then a weak yes that you're going to have to clean up next week. So let's get in front of it and get straight. I would prefer to know any pushback, anything. And oftentimes it's not a complete no. No is not an end of a conversation. No is the beginning of a conversation because it brings counteroffers. And counteroffers are often better than what you were even thinking you needed in the first place. Because they have got an insight from where they're at in the organization that is valuable to you. No, I can't do that. But I can do this. Would that work? Oh, I never even thought of that. Anybody had that aha moment at any stage where the people really do, people that you want on your team and feel part of this team, you got to give them the breadth to be on the team. Or another option in this one is, okay, by when? I can't do it for you this week, I can't do it by Friday, but I can get back to you by Monday and let you know when I can do it. And oftentimes, what you're doing is actually giving them the responsibility and the autonomy and the sense of purpose and control in their lives that they can actually feel engaged and flexible. This is where the flexibility comes in. It's not that I want Friday afternoons off. It's actually I want to be flexible to be able to move in my role. That I don't feel like I'm in a cage and like being told what to do. And so when you get into really commitments, and we're talking about a culture and organization where people honor their commitments, they acknowledge the commitment, and they let you know immediately when it's not going to happen if they have any doubt about it. So it's much cleaner. You don't have to feel like... Anybody had this situation where you've asked somebody to do something and it's getting sort of close to it and you think, there is no way they're going to deliver on that and it's just not going to happen. And they haven't, they've been avoiding you all week and then it doesn't happen and you sensed it wasn't going to happen and then you're like, God, I knew it. You got to get rid of that bullshit It really is your own bullshit as well. You're part of it. The commitment is not on the other person. It's a relationship phenomenon. I'm asking you for a commitment, Tammy, and I'm with you in it because it's my job to make sure that you've got the resources, the time, the willingness, but you've got to be pushing back on me if you're not able to do it and go, no, I can't do that. Then what can you do? Or how can you do it? What can we? How? Because we're both committed to some vision together. We both want to get there. So I'm playing a role, you're playing a role, and together we're going to get there. So huge one. This is it's a fascinating area, and it's messy in most businesses. You know, I worked with a very, very large international company up in Seattle early last year, but it was they were just a mess. And you wonder, how do these guys get anything done? But they managed to struggle through, and I remember one of the guys pulling me aside and says, nobody keeps their commitments in this whole company. Now, just think of the damage that's doing, because people want to progress, want to grow, want to develop, want to feel part of something that's winning and moving forward, and yet everybody lets each other down constantly and don't even own up to it. So it's a killer. So, and the last one that I wanted to touch on was acknowledgement and appreciation. Again, given, and I think Faith mentioned it, and Tracy, you know, being specific in your acknowledgement and recognition for each other. People need to know that, you know, they're doing a good job, and that what you recognize is that the way that you mentioned it, what you recognize gets sort of where you bring your attention, where you bring that intention. And, you know, we hit a lot of walls with this. We work a lot in the construction sector, which is a pretty hardcore, rough territory. You know, they're used to like swearing at each other, demeaning each other, gossip and slagging and, you know, joking about each other, all of that. And it can be hard to clean up that culture that has been ingrained for many years. And, you know, I've had this conversation not so long ago with the owner of a company going, why do I need to acknowledge them? They're getting paid to do the job. And we know that one. Well, the last 3 guys you hired didn't do it properly, and you were paying them, so why not acknowledge? Because that reinforces, and even though they'll brush it off, because often we don't acknowledge because it's uncomfortable for us, because they're uncomfortable. So we're getting these burly, kind of concrete guys who are like saying, you know, Robert, that was a fantastic job. I loved how you tidied up that edge and you finished it well, and they were going like, F off, you know. You know, they don't want the attention. People are not comfortable even getting acknowledged. So this is a huge challenge for some. They don't want to be in the spotlight. So doing it and being aware that for some people it's you need to do it in private. For others, they want you to sing it from the rooftop. And finding the right way to that. So if you haven't done that survey before, this is a good little one. Use the one on the... Did anybody just do it now and wants to know the results? If you are in each of those categories, if you add up your scores, if you're in the 20 to 25, then you're fabulous. You should be here doing this job instead of me. And look, I didn't say it earlier, but one of the reasons that I am so passionate about this topic is for 15 years I ran a company in New Zealand and a team of 30 plus people. I felt I sucked at all of this. I really did. I learned the hard way. And good intentions, but just didn't have the knowledge. Even though my background was like in business and training and all of that, it's hard when you're at the coalface doing this. It's hard to build in some of these practices. And I recognized then when I came across the collaborative way, God, I wish I had known this at the time. This would have made life so much easier, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel or find my way. And so, you know, if you're down in one of these categories, then pay attention. This is really important to put first in your business. And, you know, it doesn't substitute for technical ability and getting all the systems right. And we often work with companies that are using, you know, traction and EOS and all of those things. You know, get all of that in place. But this is getting your team working together. Oftentimes, even if you're using one of those systems to get your company moving forward in the right direction and tracking it and doing it properly, but we still struggle with having the conversations. We still don't hold people to the rocks. We still don't, you know, we're not able to actually get the team working together. So, yes, Darren.
Yeah, I told you you're going to regret it.
Already.
Okay. You go back a couple slides.
Yeah.
I agree with you on number 3.
Yeah.
Especially here in the South, people have Southern hospitality, have a very hard time, from my perspective and experience, of giving that constructive feedback that needs to happen. Number 3 there.
The timely constructive feedback, yeah.
Any insights on how you would, 30 seconds or
Yeah.
less, knowing you're on a time gun here,
Yeah.
any nuggets for people? Because I think that's something this region struggles with.
Yeah. It reminds me of the work of Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. Do you know him? Csikszentmihalyi. He died last week, actually, Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi. And he wrote the book called Flow. And, so the Flow Genome Project came out of his work, and many great things come out of his work. Now, when people are in a job and on a team that's high performing, you cannot leave a gap. You cannot leave time to grow in between and fester. And one of the areas that he recommended to create the flow of a team, to get teams working like super fast and like a sports team, all of these, they all use sort of the flow idea. But one of them was have specific objectives, like a specific goal, and give immediate feedback. Then people don't take it as personal. Okay? So the more that, there has to be a level of challenge and skill involved as well. So, you don't give the wrong people on the team that's actually they're not going to be challenged by this, but they're willing to step up to the mark, And there has to be minimal distractions to create a team that's going to fly. So you create the right environment to keep people focused. But when you're doing it often and immediately, it's much easier to do. It's a little bit like a coach that is on a sports team. You don't wait on the big items to give feedback. You don't make the Olympic team. Tough. Now that's devastating if you've been training for 3 years and suddenly you're not making the team. But what are the behaviors required to make that team? Well, you got to show up to training on time. You got to go and have a proper sleep. You've got to have a proper diet and be committed to this team. And, there's behaviors that if you don't show up on time for training or you're continually 5 minutes late, even if you're once 5 minutes late, you don't step over it. It's a little bit like stepping over commitments. You are now telling them it's okay. Exactly the same way when you're getting a team moving together, if there's behaviors that you're expecting within the values of your team and you're not holding people to account with that, even the simplest things that you think, it's only 5 minutes, what's the big deal? And they'll have like a line of excuses for you. You ever running late for a meeting and you're actually thinking, I could use that excuse, or maybe I should use that excuse, but there were so many things all happened. The fact is I didn't leave on time. End of story, I am late. And it often rolls into this as well because people, it's called the disease of reasons. They think that if you have a good enough reason, it actually neutralizes the fact you didn't keep your commitment. Rather than, okay, let's just peel back. You didn't keep the commitment. All right, you've got great reasons, but you didn't keep the commitment. And sometimes people think the reason is actually good enough that the commitment is not kept. It may be genuine, but let's just get it straight up. And it's exactly the same, Darren, when you're creating a team here that is clear about the behaviors, it's clear that this is what you need to do, and don't step over those little minor things that I think LeBron James talked about. It's the 100 of little behaviors every day that makes a winning team. And you don't miss the opportunity when one of those aren't held. That's the leader's job to make sure that that's not ignored. It's so that you create that environment that is clear. And people then respect that and build the trust and know, this is what I need to do to make that team work. And I'm part of it. I had a friend she's the leader of a Fitasi boat, over in Samoa. Those big, long, 100-foot boats. And she has 50 men on the boat. 50 men, young men. And they're all rowing these huge they're like tree trunks carved out. And she's the only woman skipper. A beautiful woman. She spoke at an event that I was running in New Zealand. And she said, I don't even let them get on the boat until they are able to express that they love each other. They're not even allowed on the boat together. And so, she is ruthless. No, you're off. So you establish the culture you want for whatever you want to achieve. And you don't apologize for that, because that's what they're buying into. They need to be held to account in that way. And accountability is so important in that. Now, you can keep people accountable, but you can't make them responsible. They have to choose responsibility. And that's the culture we want. We want to get people feeling responsible that this team is theirs to win through as well. But they need guidance. They need to be parented in some ways to support them in that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say make a quick, sharp, fast feedback, and you will have a winning team then, because that's what we need. We need to know if we're actually on track or not. And we can adjust very slightly, very quickly, without taking it so bloody personal. That's where our challenge is. We take it to heart. And we think I'm a bad person, and they think bad of me, and my future's compromised, So in the first session I started with the first one, but I'm going to start with the appreciation and acknowledgement this time, because I have a little different exercise for you. And this is a lovely one, okay? We all love, as you said, Faith, to be recognized and to give positive feedback, don't you? All right, here's an exercise for you. So I'd like you to find a partner. I don't mind if it's somebody you know already, but yeah, jump in and find a partner, please. Okay. Say hello. Josh, can you turn around and work with that gentleman behind you there? James, Robbie, you're good there, yeah? Okay, ready for the instructions? Everybody know who they're working with? Great. So, one of the things about acknowledgement and appreciation that's important to understand is a thank you is fine, a high five and fist bump and all of that, all great for that safety and belonging. But when you are acknowledging somebody, it's really good to step back and work your way through the steps before you even have the conversation. So one of the things is, okay, I want to acknowledge Sammy. Now, what do I want to acknowledge Sammy for, rather than going, Sammy, good job? Because that just, and Sammy feels good for a moment, but I want to acknowledge Sammy, so I'm going to think about it, and think about this for your teams. Now, what's the specifics of what Sammy did that was really impactful? So I'm going to think about Sammy. Well, he produced that report on that strategic plan that we had, and looking at the competition, and that really helped us, move forward in the right direction as a company. So, okay, so that's what's the specifics. Now, what was the impact on me? Think about that. So, well, I felt really relieved after getting that report, because I thought, I didn't want to go into this whole conversation. So the specifics was, it allowed me to relax about how we're moving forward. So think about the impact on you of what he had done. And maybe you consider the circumstances. Oh, well, Sammy had a lot going on at that time. He did that report. He had also got that other project on. He had new baby, whatever. So think of the circumstances to acknowledge Sammy. And then the final area to think about is, Sammy is a key player in the future of this company. And I think I'm going to get him involved in some other projects like that. Those 4 elements will change how you deliver your acknowledgement. Those 4 elements, now you mightn't use all of them at once, but on a big win or a big project or a big kind of acknowledgement, you want to think about it and really go through it. What are those areas that are important that I want to let Sammy know? And that's the goal. This is the second compensation. People stay in work in organizations that they are acknowledged in. Okay, rather than going, well, nobody noticed that. Who cares? Remember that negative voice in our head? So with this exercise now, you won't be able to perhaps get into all of it, but you'll be able to, it's important that acknowledgement is authentic. If you're just blowing wind up somebody, they're just going to feel it right away. It's like even kids. My son won man of the match for soccer. And I says, oh, Rumi, you must have had a great game. He says, no, it was just my turn. And well, what does that mean? He says, well, it means I have to take the oranges next Saturday. So it's like, kids gonna know, yeah, this is crap, you know. So an acknowledgement should be genuine and authentic. So decide who's going to be A and B. So if you were A in the last one, be B in this one, in the first exercise. So decide who's going to be A, who's going to talk and share. A. Who's A's? Hold up your hand if you're going to be actually sharing, speaking in this one. James, Robbie, who's going to be A? Yeah, just it doesn't matter, okay? It's just the person that's going to share their experience, okay? No, this isn't listening. No, pay attention. Pay attention. I want you to recall a recent accomplishment that you feel good about. All right? You feel really good about. Okay? Now, if in this case I'm giving you an option, if the B in this case has a really good accomplishment you want to share, I'm letting you switch roles. But feel good. Okay? Now, you are going to share with B your recent accomplishment, okay? And person B, you're going to listen generously. Meaning, what does listening generously mean, Darren?
Eye contact, looking ahead.
Pay attention. Pay attention.
Body language.
Yeah. Listening generously. Noticing your filters, setting them aside and kind of going, remember what we're normally doing when we're listening? We're thinking, I have a story just like that, and I'm going to tell it next. Yeah? Oh, yeah, that was like the time I went and did that. Right. So notice those filters, thinking of your response. Set them aside and keep listening. Listening with curiosity, listening willing to be influenced, listening to learn, listening for their contribution and their passion, rather than all the other rubbish that's going on. And if you do get distracted, call it out and go, sorry, I missed that. I got distracted there. Because that's going to happen. But don't be afraid to call it out. Okay? Clear on listening generously. So person A, you're going to share your recent accomplishment. Person B is going to listen generously. And then you're going to acknowledge them back. Okay? Using the criteria that I spoke about. What was the specifics? What impact did it have on you? Even just hearing their story. What impact did it have? Even though you weren't directly affected by it, what impact did it have on you? You don't have to share about, the future or anything else in this case. But is that clear, Darren? Would you like to repeat back the instructions? You got it, yeah? All right. Any questions?
Do I have to repeat back just for the listening, or I got it?
Does anybody have any questions, or do you want Darren? Yeah. Darren's going to repeat it back. Yeah?
All right, I'm on the spot.
Yes.
All right, so since I'm A, I'm going to tell her about my accomplishment, something I'm proud of.
Yes.
And then she's going to respond, she's going to listen generously, and then respond, letting me know how it impacted her with all the specifics. She talked about how to acknowledge.
Fantastic. All right. And I'll mind the time, so off you go. Yeah. 5:15, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't even know what time it is.
It's 5:04.
They were just finished early. No problem.
Okay. Okay, you have 30 seconds to finish telling your story. Okay, if you haven't started acknowledging the other person, please acknowledge them now. All right, if you can finish up, please. Just 10 seconds more. Okay. Okay, thank your partner, please. All right, question for is the people that shared their accomplishment. The people that shared their accomplishment, how did it feel to be acknowledged? Great. What was the insights you got out of that? You felt good? Why?
Tracy put it on an emotional level of how I became vulnerable to share my accomplishments. And when she thanked me for that, that really made a big difference.
Right.
I felt a severe connection there.
So
She was listening
she was listening.
to the way it made me feel.
Wow. And Tracy, how did it feel? Like, because obviously, do you know Robert?
Better today?
Just today. So here we have, we set up the scenario, but yet it was authentic. It was authentic in that, and people can smell a rat right away if you're trying to use this. They know. So don't try this. It'll be counterproductive if you're using this to kind of manipulate people. That's the thing about this practice. You can use it to manipulate people and teams, and it'll be sniffed out in a second. Okay? So it is important to be authentic in what you're doing here. So how was it to acknowledge him, and what impact did it have on you?
Acknowledging him was, I felt like that story that he told was really amazing. So it made me actually feel good. And then it was excited.
Right, I'll just repeat that. So she felt empathy and touched by the story in some ways. And that was just inspired. That was just Robert sharing something that perhaps he wouldn't tell anybody else in the course of a day, and kind of one of his own quiet achievements. And yet, here is somebody that's just reflecting back to him an experience of the impact on Tracy. And did you feel that you felt acknowledged? How many times do we just walk past these opportunities? They are sitting right there on the table, and what's the cost of doing it? What does it cost to acknowledge somebody? Nothing. It doesn't cost $1. This was what Tracy and Faye were talking about earlier. What are the free benefits you can give your team? Acknowledgement and appreciation. And it just costs you the time to do it, and the biggest price is that you've got to notice. You've got to notice when it's actually taking place. And it's once you start to put this into your mindset and into your awareness, like on my reminders, one of the recurring reminders that I have every day that comes up on my phone is acknowledge 2 people today. I set that challenge for you. Acknowledge 2 people a day, even just for the next week, and notice how it changes your life. It can be, once you start to notice, it's everywhere around you. It's like the person that, like Lisa ordered off Fat Man a banana pie for me to try because it was the first time I'd been in the South. And she was, banana pudding, thank you. That's what I was munching in the, A nana pudding. But you know, that is so beautiful. It touched me. And it was just a nana pudding. And so there. So you start to look for acknowledgement. You start to see it with your kids. They start to notice, because remember, your kids don't listen to you, they observe you. And that's the environment that you create culture through, because you're observed all the time. You're the owner of a company, you can guarantee you're being watched all the time. And so how you show up matters. How you speak to people matters. How you look at people matters. It's all about tone, it's about body language, and only what you say is about 7% of the time, because nobody really listens. Remember that from earlier? Were you listening, Sammy? You are. I know you're on it. And so, you know, this acknowledgement, did anybody find it difficult to receive the acknowledgement after they had shared it? Did they find it a little bit kind of, just a little bit uncomfortable, isn't it? It sort of touches you, and that's where we kind of avoid. We don't like to make people uncomfortable, because then we get uncomfortable. Remember, it's back to yourself. And so it's a really good mirror to realize that this is gold. When you get this working, that knowing that people can kind of back off and resist, you know, you really have to train people to be able to say, you know, to receive it. You know, and that's why it's important to be appropriate. And look, if it's uncomfortable for them, they can just say thank you, rather than going, it's nothing. How often does that happen? You know, it's no big deal. I'm just doing it anyway. You know, it's no big deal. But to be able to let it in builds that trust and intimacy as well. Into me see. And we don't want to be seen. So this is where you get connected on an emotional level with your team. And look, you can't leave your emotions at the door. You connect on this level, you're going to bond as a team, because then you share those gifts of experience together. Then, as Patrick shared in his workshop, you're willing to be vulnerable. Even as a leader of an organization, you're willing to hold up your hand and share that vulnerability, which, you know, then there's permission for everyone else to be there as well with you, because then you connect as human beings. Then you can listen to each other and appreciate. You don't have this boss filter. You don't have this sort of image of they're a boss and I have to sort of be careful around them. It's obviously it's with dignity and respect. And what he was the chairman of MasterCard. I saw an article about him talking about there's IQ, there's EQ, which hopefully you get as a leader a little bit more EQ than the IQ. And then there's the DQ. Has anybody heard of the DQ? There's all these. Dairy Queen. Yeah, it's definitely not. Yes. Well, DQ is the decency quotient. Decency. Are you being decent? You know, Patrick mentioned humility as one of the qualities of a leader. Now, decency is like, you know, are you a decent human being or are you a brute? And which do you want to be? You know, which are you choosing to be in your everyday workplace, where you think nobody else can do it as good as you, or nobody's listening to me? If I had $1 for every CEO that said that, nobody's listening. And yet, they're creating the culture that's being lived every day. And so, start, and they observe you listening. Be the last person to speak. Be the one that's actually drawing out and inviting people into this game with you. It is a level playing field in that way. And so, when you get this culture, they're not linear, but what you're inviting is, it's all within learning. A context of learning that nobody's ever an expert. You know, what I've realized is the more work I do in this space, the more I realize that I actually don't know half of what I'm talking about, I was going to say. But, but actually, it's like when you realize there are so many depths of listening, there are so many levels that you're constantly becoming more aware of, that this is something that you'll practice for the rest of your life. This is why our clients are practicing this after 25 years, because it's like you keep understanding other levels and people and getting better at being uncomfortable and being willing to do it because you care so deeply. Remember, culture means care. That's where the word comes from. So you care so deeply about what you want to achieve together that you're willing to be uncomfortable enough to say, Darren, look, let me help you with that. You know, it's not about you. We need to get working together to make sure we're hitting that goal. I am for you. I am. Remember, the listening builds the trust. And then you've got permission. Once you keep working on that together with the team, and you stand up and you honor your commitments as well. You know, most CEOs don't hold to what the policy of the company is because they think they're above it. They kind of, oh, well, I didn't deliver on that, and I'm not accountable to anybody. So, you know, that CEO that I was working with last week, he says, you know, I was quite happy in my stuckness until I listened to your talk. And he says, now it's gone off in my head. And he said, I realize that if I really embrace this, it's going to ask more of me as a leader to be accountable. And he says, that doesn't feel that good, because then I have to step up and be responsible. And this is the area of responsibility, because you can choose, even as the leader of an organization, to play the victim role. Or you come into an organization and you go, well, that's the way it was done before, it's not my fault. Anybody relate to that one? Or I'm not to blame. That's their fault. And so much pointing of fingers and complaining. Marketing's complaining that, you know, our sales are complaining marketing didn't bring them the leads. And then marketing's complaining that the services didn't do this. And ring any bells for anybody? There's just all of this. And that's our old methods of carving up organizations. It's a very scientific method, Taylorism, that old compartments that are competing with each other, there is no collaboration. Whereas that might have worked at one stage in a production-orientated society. In a knowledge-based society, that compartmentalization doesn't fly anymore. So the old ways of what we used to do to get things done and what happened in organizations and how we dealt with events and experiences, that doesn't cut it anymore. Then this is about asking people to step up and take responsibility. You can't make them responsible. You can make them accountable, but you've got to give them a choice to be responsible. And that's going to invite them up to a higher level within their own selves. That's going to open up learning, because they're going to start to say, right, I can sit back and just complain about this and go, it's their fault, or I can actually step up and speak up. And that's a really volatile, and oftentimes you're moving from chaos into coherence. Remember, in nature, things have to fall apart so that they can actually become coherent. And you do go through some uncomfortable stuff with this. As you're trying to find a way of working together as a team, you got to lose all your old games and patterns and habits. And that's what's keeping us stuck. Your old ways of patterns and habits. We don't want to let them go. Change is hard, as Faith talked about earlier. Okay? I think it was Faith talked about change is hard, was it? Or no, it was Jeremy in the other room. All right. So, any questions on the collaborative way? I want to thank particularly Patrick, Neil, for inviting me here today, and for everyone to make me feel so welcome here today. It's been just wonderful to be in town. Thank you.